Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Sometimes you just have to give your boss what he asks for. That's exactly what our OP did in the first story, and whether his boss liked it, we'll tell you after a short pause. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. My malicious compliance turned my office into a vacation home. This was maybe 6 or 7 years ago. I was the only full-time IT person at a $100+ million a year in sales company. I worked 55 to 65 hours a week between on-site and at home. This is important to remember. I reported to the controller and everything was fine until he quit and they hired the new guy. The new guy was the youngest controller ever hired by our site or any of our sister sites, and man, did he think he had something to prove. First thing he does is pull me into his office and inform me that my team will be the first ones in the building and the last ones to go home. I expect to see you in your office anytime I'm in this building. I don't care what you do, just make sure you're here 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. I tried to argue why that was a bad idea. He was having none of it. My response is a collapsed "okay," as if I tried to make it a single syllable. Anyone that worked with me knew they were now effed. I was literally the only guy with the keys to the castle. Literally untouchable. Malicious compliance. Met with the OSHA lead to see what appliances I could run in my office safely. No electric kettle. Met with HR and informed them that I'd be making a spreadsheet of my daily work activities just in case I needed to prove my productivity for any reason in the near future. They thought it was a joke and said, okay. Then I set up my second home. Over the course of the next few months, every day I showed up to work at 7:15, went to my office, and worked until 3:30. Then I would start my vacation. I brought in a Raspberry Pi and played games, brought in crock pots of food, and invited key members in to graze and chit-chat. One day I set up a panini press bar and invited all the engineers in for sandwiches, watched movies, listened to music and ebooks, tried to get a dartboard approved by the safety lead, said no before I could finish my request. Basically, I did all the things I did at home at the office. People would stop in after 3:30 p.m. and ask for help, and I'd tell them no. Explain what I was told and tell them to stop in at 7:30 tomorrow, which was a moot point because the site was a 8:30 to 4:30 place, and if possible, immediately go back to slacking off while they were standing there asking for help. This lasted about 2 months. Then HR called me and we had that meeting. I explained everything, showed my spreadsheet of work, and I included all the times I spent doing zero work and what I was doing to slack off in that time. I was averaging around 35 hours of work a week. Between breaks and lunches, that's normal. They were mad at me and even more mad at the controller because they knew my productivity tanked, and as a byproduct, so did multiple departments. I was told to go back to doing what I was doing before he started, and I'd start reporting to one of the departments that needed me the most instead of finance. Everyone in the office pieced together that their life got harder for those few months because the new guy deemed it so. He ended up relocating shortly after because no one wanted to work with him. I ended up working more normal work weeks, 45 hours, and everyone was just happy to have me back to help when they needed it. And our second story. A Karen and a loud comeuppance. So, I've always been a very self-confident type of person, but also easygoing and always doing my best to be decent to people. I was just brought up that way. I also expect it from others and have absolutely zero patience for people who think it's okay to act out or be blatantly rude. One afternoon, I was at Wally World trying to do some shopping. I hadn't thought much about it, but happened to be wearing the store's colors. A dark blue button-up shirt, neat jeans, and nice work shoes. I'm a trucker and was wearing a shirt from my company. I just like to dress nice and look respectable and dress like this all the time. At any rate, I then hear it. A Karen in the wild. A forceful clearing of the throat. Excuse me? I turned to look, and I kid you not, I wouldn't have believed anyone could look like the stereotype, but there she stood, business attire and shoulder-length, straight platinum blonde hair, A huge, the world bows to my whims attitude? She gazed at me sternly, her eyes steely, her demeanor as if she were about to berate a servant who'd erred. I stared, silent for a moment, gathered back a swell of irritation at just seeing the attitude this lady had, then just simply blurted, "What?" She jerked back, incredulous, as though I'd just slapped her. But she was also quick to recover. Her look of steely-eyed and now very justified outrage staring out at me from within her perfectly coiffed, straight, platinum blonde locks. "Employees should not speak to customers in such a fashion," she informed me. Yes, she used those exact words, and did inform me as though I had done something very wrong by addressing such an important customer in such an impertinent manner. My brows just went up. That was all, but I said in a very level tone, "I don't work here." Then I turned away from her, just intent on going back to my shopping. "You do not turn away from me," she seethed from behind me, then went so far as to grab the back of my suspenders. I very calmly turned back around, looked down at her for a sec. I'm 6 foot and she was like 5.5 or something. Then I leaned down very close to her face, this was long before COVID, and began in a very low voice. I said, then raising my voice to its loudest by the word, finished with, "I do not work here." By the time I was out with "here," I was so loud, I could have been heard all the way through this superstore. I even think I blew her hair back a little. The look on her face was wonderful. I'm sorry," she stammered. "I thought you were—" I cut her off. "Thought I was an employee, yes?" I was still dead in her face, my eyes now 10 times harder than hers ever could be. "Which you thought gave you the right to speak to me and treat me as though I was beneath you?" I leaned in even closer. She stood, spellbound, a viper and a mouse. She the mouse, me the viper. "Well, I got news for you, lady. Buying stuff from a store and spending a little money does not grant you a license to abuse or belittle people." At which point I straightened and then did turn on my heel and walked away from her, while she stood there, gawping like a fish out of water, absolutely speechless. It was delightfully wonderful. The icing on the cake was you telling her that not only should she not be rude to you, but that treating those who work at places she shops at as the dirt beneath her probably hideous shoes is unacceptable. And our last story. Manager insists I do my job properly. Happy to comply, sir. In early 2020, I was hired under the title Assistant Manager at a local automotive shop. We mainly sold tires and alloy wheels for passenger vehicles. The company owned several stores. I reported directly to my manager, who then reported to the owner of the company. Shortly after I was hired, I noticed the behavior of the manager was far from professional. He would constantly mock and berate me for being the new guy. I believe part of this was jealousy and insecurity on his part, as I ended up recording more sales under my name within the first few months. He would also knock off work early and start drinking beer, whilst the rest of us continued to work. I remember when he found out that I participated in MMA training sessions after work, he tried to goad me into a fight for his own amusement. Clearly, this guy didn't like me, and I was starting to get the feeling that he was trying to get me to snap or lose my cool, and as a result, my employment. I became even more certain of that with what happened next. Story. During the first few months that I'd worked there, I'd noticed that our takings for the day and sales records didn't match. I would often spend half an hour to an hour after work trying to figure out where the errors were coming from, whilst the manager would simply throw his hands in the air and exclaim that he had no idea how this was happening. The recurring issue seemed to be that our cash takings had been recorded incorrectly. There would sometimes be an excess amount of cash that didn't match up to what was recorded on our sales/invoicing software. Other times there would be less. I was, at the time, an accounting student studying towards my bachelor's degree. I was already suspicious of the cash being out each day. However, given how the manager had been treating me up until this point, I was concerned that any complaint would somehow be twisted and used against me. And boy, was I right. Several weeks later, my manager took some time off. During this time, I managed a personal record in store sales and also noticed something interesting. The cash was never out at the end of each shift. I reported this directly to the owner of the company. Given I was acting manager during the time my manager was away, I was expected to report to the owner every day and explain what had been occurring whilst the manager was there. In all honesty, I was hopeful that the owner would be having a word with the manager about the discrepancies. However, I was also weary, as I believed once the owner spoke to my manager that the manager will immediately know it was me who reported this. When the manager returned to work, he immediately approached me with a disgruntled look on his face. "I've spoken with the owner. You tried to blame me for the discrepancies? You should focus on doing your job properly, and then this wouldn't happen." I was quite taken aback by how angry he was, though I wasn't surprised that he twisted it and tried to place blame on me. Given his reaction, I'm even more suspicious at this point. He wants me to do my job properly, huh? Malicious compliance ensues. That same week, I got to work. I started paying attention to what customers were paying when they were dealing with my manager. Behind his back, I began examining all of his sales transactions and invoices with a fine-tooth comb. As the days rolled by, I started to find evidence of his dishonesty. When it came to a few cash sales, my manager was doing the following. Example: would tell the customer the price is $200 if he pays cash. Would discount the price by $50 in the sale/invoicing software. Would put the extra cash into the till and record a $150 cash sale. Before we did the cash up at the end of the day, he would sneakily pocket this extra cash while no one was around, though he was very foolish as he clearly couldn't remember the exact amount he'd swindled. Hence, why the cash would be up some days, didn't swindle enough, or the cash would be down, swindled too much. I took some screenshots of the discounts he'd been giving on sales and sent them to the business owner along with a report with a detailed description of my findings. The report also showed that on all days he wasn't there for the cash count, there was no variance. When he was there, well, the owner was infuriated. This man had been his trusted employee for years. The owner was so infuriated, in fact, that he ordered my manager to do a mandatory drug test, pee in a cup style, on the same day he found out. No surprise, he failed. The manager was terminated immediately for violation of his contract and was later taken to court by the owner in an attempt to recover the stolen funds. Safe to say, I was promoted to the store manager position shortly after his termination. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.